audio.
It's worth every dollar to hire a mountain guide. They will teach you so much, and then you can go out and climb that climb without them and have like the best day of your life.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Struggle. It is me, your weekend warrior host, Ryan, and I'm bringing you another weekend warrior installment in this series that's quickly becoming one of my favorite tent poles of the Struggle Climbing Show, and I think yours as well. Hearing from a lot of you listeners who are really responding to this. It's just so cool to connect with real people who have jobs and families and school and obligations and who are out there pushing themselves in whatever that means for them, whether it's in the gym, out on rock, trad, boulders, punching into their first 5'11", or going for 5'14". It's all happening here on the Weekend Warrior series. Such inspiring stories. I'm loving it so much, and this episode is no exception. Today we are connecting with Doug Hartman. Doug is about my age, I think exactly my age, 46 years old. He's got a family, and he is an ER doctor, so that's where the comparisons stop. He's like a high-performing individual after that. I'm a podcaster, he's an ER doctor. And he lives out within striking distance of the Yosemite Valley. He didn't always. He moved out there. And he kind of brings us a tale of two climbing stories in this Weekend Warrior episode. First, we talk about his road to his first 513A, which was in some small part inspired by my own road, which was really cool to hear. And so we kind of geek out over what he learned on his own personal journey to 13A. He's gleaned a lot from various podcasts and articles and books, and he kind of distilled those down and broke them down in a way that was really cool to hear what made the difference for him, and also, just as importantly, what didn't make the difference for him. And I think there's a lot to be learned. Whatever your goals are, wherever you're at in your climbing journey, he really communicates that well. And then, about halfway through, we shift and we put our focus on trad climbing and a lot of the stuff that he's been doing out in the valley. And this is an area of heightened interest for me. I just love being in beautiful places and standing on the top of things. And if you are a trad climber, or if you're just curious or interested in trad climbing, Doug brings a master class for entry-level traditional climbing. He lays out his 4 rules of crack climbing, each successive rule breaking the rule prior, which are fun, just kind of the way that he's created them, but also really informative. And then we talk about bold climbing, how to manage fear when you get above placing gear, and then also ways to learn how to excel faster, especially in Yosemite Valley style, like more vert kind of granite climbing, but whatever style of trad climbing that you might be interested in, or even if you're not interested in it, this conversation is fascinating because he really brought a lot of focus and thought to the things that he shares with us. So I think you are going to enjoy the heck out of this conversation from start to finish. And if you are a weekend warrior on your own journey, I would love to hear from you. I'll tell you on the tail end of this episode where you can click and fill out the form to hopefully have a conversation with me on the show at some point in time as I continue this series for the indefinite future. I love these. I'm going to just keep trying to do one a month or so, and I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and speaking of epic, beautiful, sandbagged, granite, multi-pitch trad climbing, I am going to be out in Squamish in just a couple of weeks for the Arc'teryx Academy. If you are going to be out there, or if you can make it out there, come on out, say hi. I've been looking forward to attending this thing for years, and I'm finally getting out there. I'm going to be shooting some content with incredible athletes. I'm going to be partying. Chris Kalous and I are trying to figure out how we could do like a live podcast like we did from ICF in Lander, because he's going to be out there. I hope my skin holds up, because I am going to be bouldering, single pitch climbing, and multi-pitch climbing, and I cannot wait. So there's probably still some tickets available. Maybe the clinics are all full by the time you're hearing this, but you can pop over to the Arc'teryx Academy link and check that out. And if you can make it out there, I'd love to see you. I mean, this conversation with Doug came right at the right time for me to brush up on my crack climbing tactics before I get out there. So thank you, Doug. I appreciate the crash course. And what else is going on with me in Weekend Warrior land? Well, it's hot and muggy out here in Kentucky, but I'm still trying to get outside at least a day a week and having fun with it. I love getting outside in these bad conditions, quote unquote bad conditions. There's no bad conditions. It's just fun climbing, and then there's performance climbing. Doing a lot of fun climbing right now, and then also finishing up the kilter board in my basement. the Kilter full ride, if you want a session with me, you can use code STRUGGLE and grab yourself a Kilter and get like a big discount, and we can have a lot of fun. Oh my gosh. Stay tuned to Instagram and YouTube for some of that content. The build has been really cool. I'm hinging it from the top, and that allows me to get more room underneath the wall as the angle gets steeper. It's a really creative way to make an adjustable board work in a low ceiling space like I have. So yeah, I'll be posting more about that, and if you're interested, you can just like hit me up. I'm happy to answer any questions on it. All right, let's go ahead and unpack some performance sport climbing, performance trad climbing, and just making it all work with weekend warrior Doug Hartman. I really enjoyed reading your submission. It got me pumped about trad climbing, but also you seem incredibly well versed in climbing content out there, listening to a lot of the podcasts, reading a lot of the resources, and you've worked with various training programs and all that. So yeah, I'm really excited to just kind of look at climbing through your eyes and see what's worked for you as a fellow weekend warrior here. And that's probably a good place for us to start here, Doug, which is learning a little bit about you as a weekend warrior. So why don't you hit me with the background?
Yeah, so I am calling in from Oakland, California. I grew up in Virginia. Started climbing in college when I was like 18 or 19. And back in Virginia, there was like one other climber there, and he was a high schooler. So the two of us just kind of bumbled around in, and I'm not even kidding, a racquetball court that was changed into a climbing gym. It was,
Get out of here.
It was a pretty sad scene. Yeah. And
Do they still have like the glass walls?
They did. They had the glass walls.
Amazing.
It was all vertical. They changed the back of it to a roof. And, you know, it was a very lonely scene, but at the same time, it gave us like total autonomy to just kind of be ridiculous. I don't know if you know him, the 16-year-old that it was basically just the two of us climbing was John Glassberg.
Oh, yeah.
Who I think has, you know, just made Girl Climber and has really made a name for himself in the sort of in the media world and as a videographer, photographer.
Oh, yeah. He ended up doing all right. He and Jess Glassberg, of course, his partner, are incredible filmmakers. And yeah, Girl Climber, the Emily Harrington film that you just alluded to, looks absolutely incredible. And yeah, great climbers, great filmmakers as well. So did he, in the early days, was he able to shoot some sick shots of you in the racquetball court?
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all. And not only did he not have a camera, but he had like the saddest trad rack. And I remember learning to climb with him. I had no mentors, and he, I don't think, had any mentors, but he had the humility of a 16-year-old, which is, I know everything will be fine. And so I had the 16-year-old sort of guiding me through climbing, like, you know, the intro to outdoor climbing. And I think he had like, you know, 3 of those like rigid stemmed friends cams.
Yeah.
And then like an assortment of hexes and nuts and like tri-cams. And we would just go out to some like random no-name rock and just see how high we could get. And it inevitably, like every trad climb for me was like, I'd place all the cams in the first 15 feet. I'd climb up another 15 feet and I'd be yelling down to him to try to figure out like how to place a hex or a tri-cam or something. And then I find out he didn't really know how to place it either. And I'd end up just like trying not to kill myself until I got to the top. And we kind of did that every weekend. And I remember climbing one climb, and these were just random like it was like half climbing, half gardening, and just climbing through shrubs. And I saw a bull right in the middle of the face. And I was like, John, what's that? And he's like, oh, what's a bull? And I was like, right, but like I've seen them occasionally at the top, but like why is this like right in the middle of the face? And there's another one. And he was like, well, that's called a sport climb. And he's like, yeah, you could just clip the bolts instead of trying to place your own protection. And I was like, well, why are we doing this?
Right.
So I basically saw that bolt, never looked back, and I climbed like exclusively sport for like 10 years. And then I came out to Yosemite, And then all of a sudden it clicked. And it was just this like moment of feeling like I just some way, somehow had to figure out how to get up those walls.
Oh, yeah.
And I tried at the beginning and I was not natural and it was very tough. And I just remember I have memories of like sticking like both hands, both feet in a crack, and somehow everything was sliding out at the same time. I just couldn't figure out, how people did it. I spent my first paycheck. I remember so we were in school, then grad school. I'm an ER doc out here, so we were in medical school out in Rhode Island and doing residency there. And then I spent my first real paycheck on a trad rack. And I was just like, I'm going to go out to Yosemite and I'm just going to figure out some way to put all these gadgets in the rock and figure out how to climb.
Oh, man.
And that sort of brings me to then, this like, I've said like Yosemite's sort of like a love that doesn't really love me back. But I keep going back to it.
Hell yeah. Well, there are a few places on Earth as lovable as the valley there, so I'm excited to explore a little bit of your adventures and your time there. But I appreciate the background, and what a fun background it is, and that brings us current. So just kind of to complete the snapshot of who Doug is. What's your age?
46.
Okay, so 46, Oakland, California. Background in some racquetball vert climbing, as well as some sport and some trad throughout there. Would you consider yourself now predominantly a traditional climber, or do you mix things up?
Yeah, I do. I sort of mix things up. For like probably a solid decade, I just dedicated all my time to figuring out how to climb a little more competently in Yosemite. And then as I got older and I got more into all this great information in the podcast and the training realm, I was trying to figure out if I could squeeze a little bit more mileage out of this aging body. And so I got into sport climbing again, and I was sort of following your road to 13A. And to brag myself, I got my first 13A in March this year.
Yes.
And
Sick.
It was definitely lots of guidance through the podcast that got me to that.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I'm happy to hear that. And dude, congratulations. That's amazing.
And so I have these, now it's sort of like I have these like, I think opposing goals, which is, I think how a lot of us plateau is we just have like eyes are bigger than our capabilities. And my daughter, I have a non-climbing wife. I have 2 kids, one who has told me I am no longer allowed to ask him to climb anymore. He is sick of it and doesn't want to climb. And I have a daughter who does climb, and she's 15 years old on a comp team. And she officially flashed a project that I am still working on the kilter board. She has officially surpassed me. But
Awesome.
I'm trying to turn her on to some Yosemite crack climbing as well. So I have this goal of like, God, I've never done Midnight Lightning. I'd love to do Midnight Lightning. But I also have some bigger multi-pitch climbs that I like to do. And I'm not sure I can train for both at the same time. I'm not, you can't train for the 100-meter dash and the mile at the same time. And I'm not sure which way, how to focus myself.
Oh, I mean, again, in terms of an embarrassment of riches, of opportunities, that you've got everything at your disposal for where you're at, and you can even head into other areas that aren't too far from you. I lived in Los Angeles for a while and made it into the Southern Sierra a bit. I've done a little bit of climbing in the valley, but not nearly as much as I would like to. But yeah, I'm excited to pick your brain on those goals. The 513 sport route that you did, maybe this is a cool place for us to just jump in a little bit on what you felt has worked for you, because as an ER doc, I'm assuming you've got some really intense schedules, and so not a ton of free time to train or to get out and climb. And can you tell me a little bit about what that journey was like for you? Maybe you could give us an overview of what the route was like and what it demanded in terms of strength or fitness or ability. Touch on some of the things that you felt were the difference makers for it.
Yeah, I did a training block for the 513, and I really like the concept of like sort of 4-ish days a week climbing, 2 days of a focus area, and then 2 days of a non-focus area. I think I had gotten that, to give him credit. Thomas Cunningham, I think, that was talking about that on your podcast about that sort of like nonlinear progression. And
Yeah, he's a super smart, a fellow ER doc, by the way, which is cool, and a busy guy and a dad. He's got 3 kids, and I spent some time climbing with him when he's got the time, which isn't always. But yeah, he's a big fan of essentially just trying to identify what you need and then, schedule it in where you can, which I'm assuming for you is a similar challenge being an ER doc yourself.
I'll tell you, the benefit of being an ER doc is that it's allowed me to do something I call invisible climbing, which is the spouse is at work, the kids are at school, and I can climb during the day. And I sort of have this license to just do exercise for myself. Whereas I think it'd be much tougher if I had a 9 to 5 to then tell my spouse, can you do dinner and bedtime and the kids' homework and all that stuff? Because I'm going to go to the gym for 3 hours. So,
right.
It's given me like little hidden moments in the week to train. But yeah, I did a training block where I did sort of like a very light endurance base, and then like 2 days a week of strength, and then 1 day a week of power endurance, 1 day a week of just very easy, almost like recovery arc climbing, and then switched it over more focused to power, and then did like the cool thing about power endurance was, I'd read you only need 6 sessions, and that's what I found I needed. So it was like 2 sessions a week for 3 weeks, and I felt like pretty fit and ready to go at the top of the climb.
Yeah, really cool.
And then I think that the key learnings for me were, one, I think, I was following you along your journey to 13A, and I remember you were saying like, this was my hangboarding numbers. And at that time, I couldn't hit your numbers. And I was thinking, oh, shoot, I'm not ready for this 513 because I was assuming that the number was a prerequisite to sending the route. Mm-hmm. And what I found was I really underestimated the importance of movement. And there was these crux sections, and just figuring out the movements of those crux sections and then replicating them roughly like on the kilter board made the crux go from impossible to something I could do every red point attempt. And then as I was doing the crux, then I was falling at the top. And so then I realized, okay, now it's time for power endurance. But yeah, so the one was like the realization of the importance of movement in it. And then the second thing was the importance of mimicking and like really sort of replicating the route as far as like the time on the rock, the even timing the rests, and then mimicking the hold size and everything. So my hangboarding, I was doing more of like 5-second hangs. I would build up to like 4 working sets of 5-second hangs at, 4-finger half crimp, and doing that twice a week. And then I sort of plateaued at that. And then I moved it more to a power phase and changing it to campus latches, which I felt were like really helpful just to like latch and then pull through. And so I would latch, a rung. I wouldn't match on that rung, and I would just pull through to the next highest rung. And I felt like that was really effective.
And that replaced your hangboarding during that time?
That replaced the hangboarding.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it was really interesting too for you to discover that the hangboarding number that you were going for, ultimately, it sounds like, was neither here nor there. I mean, if you're working crux moves or simulating a crux in a sense on a kilter board, you're likely getting the stimulus to the fingers that you would have been getting on a hangboard anyway, to some extent. But it is interesting that you kind of had an idea in mind or a target in mind of what you wanted to do on the hangboard, and ultimately, it sounds like that didn't play all that much into what it took to put together that 13A.
I know. It's interesting. It really messed with my head because I was really demoralized. I had a couple opportunities to go out there, and I almost didn't go out to get on the route because I felt like it'd just be a waste of time because my numbers aren't good enough. It just shows like just going out there and getting on, like the best way to train for the route is on the route.
Right. Yeah. And how did you identify this training program? Were you working with a coach, or did you write this yourself?
So about a year ago, I had worked with Lattice, and then I sort of mixed and matched Lattice and the learnings on podcasts to kind of come up with this. And at that point, what I had done was I sort of use the hangboard routine to reflect where I was in the training progression. So I started with like during the base phase, density hangs, and then the next strength phase, I was doing 5-second hangs. And then actually I sort of plateaued there. And I did this hybrid that I thought worked really well for me. And I was thinking the lifts, when someone does a lift, you lift the weight for about 2 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds, then you put it down.
Right.
And I thought it was kind of interesting how there are these thoughts of like people doing edge lifts where they're really only the time under tension is like 2 or 3 seconds per rep, and they're doing like 4 reps. But then when we hangboard, we're doing time under tension of like 5 to 7 seconds. So what I did was I sort of like went from the density hangs and then 5 to 7 second hangboards to sort of an edge lift like hanging. And I had felt in the past just playing around with edge lifts, and I had heard this from others, that there is a learning curve before, for you to translate an edge lift into useful crimp strength, like as you're climbing, just because it doesn't necessarily look as closely related to the actual climbing movement. So I had felt that hangboarding made me feel stronger, like that position of hanging from the fingers down through the whole muscle chain, down into the shoulder and the back, as I was on a board climb or on a gym climb or a sport climb, that sort of muscle tension and effort felt very familiar.
Right.
So it just seemed to translate better. So what I did was I kind of did these hangboards, but I just did 4 reps of like 2-second hangs. And then
And that was it total. Just 4 reps.
Yeah. So similarly to, I think the other guest you had on here with like the Bjork.
Aaron from the Weekend Warrior series. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I did something very similar where I would start with just like no hangs for 4 sets to warm up. And I would do, just push, pull, a couple, body weight squats. And then I would cycle that a couple times. And then all of a sudden I felt like my fingers were ready to pick up my body weight. And then I would do that a couple times. And then I would add 10 pounds, add 20 pounds, add 40 pounds, add 50, and then I'm like, okay, I'm like ready. I'm feeling good. And I could tell my readiness as if you've probably noticed if you're not warmed up enough, you kind of shake and you're hanging on the holds and you can kind of feel your muscles trembling a little bit. And that would be my signal that I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that stress yet. So then I would go down in weight until I wasn't shaking. And then I would try that next weight again. I was like, okay, I'm not shaking. I'm ready to handle this weight. And then I would go up to like, I think at that point, I could only really do like 50 pounds for 5 seconds. And then doing that protocol, I got up to just doing, 60, 65 pounds at 2 seconds. And I would do 4 reps of that. So I would do 4 reps of 2 seconds. That's 1 set. So I would do 2 seconds, shake for a sec, 2 seconds, shake for a sec. Those are like basically like my 4 reps of edge lifts.
Right.
And that's 1 set. And then I would take like 4 minutes off and then do that again.
Okay.
And then by the end of that, I was able to gain another 10 pounds and I was able to get up to like 60 pounds. And then I hit another plateau. And so I was like, okay, it's time to just abandon this and I'll move to campus latches, which worked out well because in that protocol, that was sort of the power phase. So strength phase, probably the first month I did 5 to second hangs 4 times. And then the second month, that's when I tried to do just these like 2-second 4 rep hangs. Yeah. And then I started plateauing after that. And then in the power phase, I started doing the campus latches. And then actually, I didn't really need to do any additional finger strength because after the power phase, it was mainly just doing power endurance. And what I found was I would go out to the route and I had one good red point attempt. And I was like, just like smoked, done for the whole day.
Right.
And what I found was during that power endurance phase, I wanted to replicate the whole red point day. So I wanted 3 good red point attempts. So on my power endurance day, I would do like, I timed myself. I was on the route for like, I don't know, 8 minutes. So I would do a circuit on the kilter board that would last about 8 minutes, whether it'd be like a 4x6 or 4x7, just to make sure I could handle that work capacity. And then I would take like 20 minutes off. And then I would do that 3 or 4 times. I would just make sure that I was like totally massively pumped, for that 8 to 10 minutes. And then I would take like a half hour off, and then I would repeat that, 3 or 4 times. And then I found that I could go out to the crag and I could give like my 3rd red point attempt. I had the capacity built up where I could still give a good red point attempt.
This episode's brought to you by Rhino Skin Solutions, and y'all, we're hitting the hot days right now. And what happens in the summer? Oh my gosh, everything gets hot. When I'm at the gym, it's hot. When I'm at the crag, it's super hot. And when it gets hot, our hands sweat. And when our hands sweat, we're not able to hold on to things. So Rhino is here to save the day and save the summer climbing season. I want to tell you about my favorite hot weather Rhino products right now. First of all, every day I'm using their performance cream. It's got like a slightly drying agent to it, but basically it helps to soothe and strengthen the skin with a little bit of an antiperspirant in there. I use that every day. It just keeps my skin like pretty tough and pretty durable throughout the season. But then when I know I want to perform, when I'm gearing up to send the proj at the gym, or I want to have a really nice day outside, I'm going to use their dry spray or their tip juice. My hands stay dry, I chalk up less, my skin stays really healthy and good condition so I can have repeated efforts. And then I come home, I clean my hands really well, and if I've really beat them up during the day, I'm going to use some of their repair cream. I love the smell of it. I love the feel of it. It just works. It works really, really well to take care of your skin. And Rhino, by the way, is going to take care of you. They're going to give you 20% off your purchase by using code STRUGGLE at checkout. The link is right there in your show notes, or you can pop over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/rhino to fill your cart and take care of your hands. Going back to the original kind of earlier part there, the strength phase, and then that more like kind of strength power phase with the shorter hangs. One thing that you said stood out to me, which was that you did them until you noticed a plateau, and then you switched it up. And oftentimes, certainly maybe a pitfall, if you will, that I fall into is that whether I'm programming block myself or I'm working with a coach who's programming it, I'm not very aware of whether I'm improving or plateauing, because I'm just like, okay, I've got 12 sessions. I'm just going to do these 12 sessions. It sounds like you had a little bit more thought to kind of where you're at. Can you expand a little bit more on that? Like, first of all, am I understanding correctly that you weren't just programming a set number of sessions and going through them, that you were like maybe aware of when that type of intervention just wasn't yielding results and then you were moving on?
Yeah. What I sort of did was I was hoping to see if I could push things by just like 1% or 2% per week. Mm-hmm. So each week I did like the 50 pounds, and then the next week it was like 52 and a half pounds, and then 55 pounds. And I was able to kind of maintain that. And then I hit a wall at 60 pounds. And then I was, my first thought was, let's just take a deload week and come back to it again.
Sure.
And then I tried it again and it wasn't working. And then I think that was a big acknowledgement to we fear plateaus, but I think instead of fearing it, we should expect them and realize that it's a normal part of, doing a periodized training block, that you will plateau after a certain stimulus. Mm-hmm. And I think it also, and I say this, my bias is my wife is actually an eating disorder doctor. And I think in climbing, you have the strength weight ratio. And it's very tempting if you hit a plateau with your strength to start going after your weight.
Sure.
Instead of, and that can end up, in a dangerous sort of snowball. So instead, just acknowledging the plateau and then knowing that it's just time to move on. I'm doing a new finger protocol right now, and we'll see what it does. But so far, I've already gotten I was able to do a 5-second hang with 75 pounds. And
Wow.
I'm trying to get the ever elusive, middle beefsteaker, one arm. I can't do that, but I can do like a one arm on a 30 mil edge for about 2 or 3 seconds. So I'm still making some progress. We'll see. We'll see where that leads.
Yeah, well, I mean, I really like the way that you've looked at that, which is that it's about the progress. And if you're not seeing the progress, well, let's just mix it up a little bit. And we can get bogged down as climbers, especially kind of more type A driven climbers, that many of which seem to be the personality type of climbers too, set a workout routine or create a plan, a 12-week plan or whatever length it might be, and just say, okay, this is it, and I'm sticking with it. But I really liked how flexible you were to recognize, okay, I've probably eked out what I'm going to get from this intervention. Let me move on to something else. And as you noted, you got a little bit more specific as you were getting closer to wanting to red point this 13A project. And one of them, as you said, it was kind of trying to replicate the Crux on a kilter board and also focusing on that time, not just on route, but like for the day, essentially the work capacity that your body would need for the day. So you could go out there and have quality attempts, which for weekend warriors is important. If you get out there and you just blow everything on the one attempt, but you cleared a day with the family and the job and all that, you're really not optimizing the amount of time that you could be sending out at the crag. So could you talk a little bit more about how you felt? It seems like finger strength, for climbers is always important, but maybe it wasn't the most important with you climbing your hardest sport grade. If you kind of were clicking away at those gains, but you weren't spending a lot of time doing them. You're talking about a handful of hangs at a handful of seconds in a couple of sets. Like in terms of the time spent, it was a very small amount of time spent on the overall training and preparing and ultimately kind of projecting phase of this 13A journey for you. So what stands out in terms of as you got closer to sending and ultimately what led to the send that you learned on that process?
So like you said, I think replicating the route was really important for me and identifying what components of the route were hard. And so for me, I have very long arms. I think I have like a plus like 5 or 6 ape index. So
yeah.
For vertical climbing, it comes in very handy. For overhanging climbing, I really struggle on underclings. So there were 2 undercling cruxes on this route. And I realized just like I have to incorporate some undercling just movements each week. And so I was sort of identifying like, are there specific components of this route that I'm struggling with that I need to sort of level up on? And so underclings was one. And then the other thing that I realized was that I had to spend a lot of focus or more focus on the resting component of the route. And what I mean by that is there are like 4 rests. One's amazing and 3 are marginal.
Sure.
And when you climb, you have this scarcity mindset of like, I have to take every single rest. And what I found was that the rests were marginal. And I think cumulatively trying to take all those rests just meant that I was spending more time hanging on an overhanging route. And I actually started performing better by not taking those rests.
Interesting.
And so then I realized, I'm like, okay, the first thing to think about when you come to a rest is, do you actually take it or do you just climb through? It's scary to consider like hitting a jug, chalking up once and moving rather than just hanging out there for another 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I realized was I wanted, it's pumpy and I'm getting tired and I was falling at the top. So move fast. But I realized was if I just slowed down the pace of my climbing and actually through the Crux, if I took a moment and just, I think you realize, or I realized going through this Crux, you have so much tension in your body and you're almost like just holding your breath the whole time that you feel you build this fatigue in your shoulders, your back, your whole body, not necessarily your fingers, and just like sort of counterintuitively pausing in the middle of the Crux and just relaxing my body for a second, exhaling, taking a breath, and then going for the move, I would get the move. But if I didn't take that like tiny pause, even though I was spending less time on small holds, I was getting tired and gassing myself out by the time I got to the top of the route.
Yeah.
So it's like choosing whether to take a rest, figuring out how to climb more relaxed. And then the other component was a lot of the climbing, you have rests, I think a lot of 13s, the whole route's not a V7. It's like you have some easy climbing between sections of hard climbing.
Right.
And I had to like intentionally focus on relaxing during the easy sections because I would dial it up to 11 to get through the Crux, but then I would climb another 10 feet and realize I was still at 11. Like
Right.
I needed to just dial it down for a second to have the energy. And then when you do have a rest, you want to stay there forever, but at some point, even if it's like a massive jug, at some point you're going to start not getting anything back and just accumulating fatigue.
Totally.
And so I kind of had to figure out like what that tipping point was. And I actually mimicked that on the kilter board. I found a similar hold and was just like, all right, I'm going to get ridiculously pumped. I'm going to hang on this hold. I'm going to start my stopwatch and figure out at what point am I maximally recovered and at what point have I tipped it too far and I'm actually just starting to become more fatigued.
Right.
So I think it's a long answer of your question that could be summed up that I had to focus a lot on the resting part of the route in order to get the route.
Yeah, well, cool. I mean, so much nuance there and so much that you discovered about yourself on that. And predominantly, it sounds like you were learning about this on the route and then sometimes taking it back to your training, like on the kilter board. But a lot of this you were just kind of implementing on the route. How fast or slow can I climb? How do I feel recovered? Were you chunking up the route in sections? Did you low point it or high point it? Or were you, tackling these sections in a way tactically that helped you to obtain these learnings faster than, just doing red point attempts?
I mean, in theory, yes. I think in reality, I love the idea of low pointing. I think the only times I low pointed it were by accident. And what I mean by that is I would see how far I could get. And then after like the third bolt, I had to slip and fall.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, here I am. I fell. I'm not pumped and I just made a stupid foot slip. So let me see if I can go to the top. And so I would do the low points then, but I just didn't
accidental low points. It's good. You accidentally had good tactics on the route.
Yeah. But the other thing I think just from like a performance standpoint is I kind of put this route on a pedestal and I started getting anxious and sort of tense, physically tense before I would try for a red point attempt.
Yeah.
And that I think was very counterproductive. And it's funny, as soon as I started thinking that like I enjoy this route and I like doing it, and as soon as I get it, I may never be on this route again. And then all of a sudden I started thinking like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to miss this route.
Yeah.
And so then on my red point attempts, I'm a little embarrassed saying this aloud. I hit this hold right before you start getting into the overhanging section. And I remember holding the hold and I was like, oh, here's my old friend again. And I was just like, oh, and all of a sudden it was like, I'm connecting with this old friend, this familiar, the familiarity I think I used to make it feel comfortable and not scary of just like, oh, this is a familiar route. I love these moves. It's like I'm just connecting with my old friend for the next 8 minutes. And saying that sort of in my head made me just completely physically relax. And I think actually on the day that I got it, the bottom half of the route was wet.
Wow.
And I think I went up there with no intention of sending. And I think that was probably the key to sending, was just taking the pressure off.
Oh, dude, I love so much about that. I really like the gratitude that you had when you grabbed that old friend, the hold there, and just the awareness of it. And even the kind of the pre-nostalgia, if you will, that went into that. I experienced that on the Force where I was getting, pretty close to knowing when it would go. And like even on the hike in would think like, this might be one of the last times I hike in with this route, in mind, or, that I tie in for this route. And sometimes it did for me, at least. I don't know if you experienced much of this or not, but because my project, went on a little bit longer than I had originally anticipated, there were moments where I felt like I just kind of wanted it to be done, or, why is this taking so long? But then I'd have like a little of that nostalgia come in, just that gratitude for like, but you know what? I only get to do this once. I only get to struggle on this Crux in this experience one time. I could get on the route again, of course, but it's not likely that I'll spend a whole lot of time on it. And so, yeah, having that awareness and that gratitude while you were climbing to experience that maybe did alleviate some of that send pressure. And of course, when the route is wet and you're like, well, it's definitely not going to go, that helps as well.
Yeah, definitely. But then did you have any like struggling with that pressure to finish it? Did you have any sort of like mental tricks to help you, kind of cope with that additional sort of mental angst?
It's a good question. And for me, at least on the Force, I don't think I handled it very well. I had on other routes, I would just like be like, I'll just come back to this and go do other things. But I was so driven and so kind of singularly focused on the Force during that period that I don't think I had any very good trend. And similarly to you, although slightly different circumstances, when I ended up sending it, it was my first red point attempt of the fall season. This was the following year. And I had been doing a series of low points up to that. And I was going to do another low point, one more bolt lower, which almost would have taken me to the ground. And my friend was like, well, why don't you just check in on the route? Like just start from the bottom and just, see where you come off and see how you feel. And I was like, okay, I guess let's just do that. And then I sent. And so I very much pulled on without being in the mental space of, oh, this is a red point attempt, and all of the different kind of baggage and anxieties and expectations and stuff that come with that. So I don't know, maybe that's the trick. Maybe the trick is essentially being prepared, but then not thinking to yourself like this is it, which you can't always do. Sometimes you got to think this is it and kind of go into battle mode, but that worked for me. And it sounds like similarly it worked for you, but because of the wetness of the route.
Yeah, like letting go, but just a little bit,
Right, exactly. Like I still tried hard, and I'm sure you did too, because it's a limit route.
And I was thinking, actually, just click. You used different beta at the top, didn't you?
I did. I mean,
right?
Different than I had the prior season. I had learned, only like a couple weeks earlier had seen somebody go up and use a heel hook that I hadn't seen. And so, I had kind of switched up, but I had practiced it for a few low points and found that it would probably be good beta for me.
Yeah, I was just thinking is like, for me, I'm not sure I had to get any stronger for the route. I mainly just kind of had to learn what components were most challenging for me with the route, and then train those weaknesses, focus on the rest, build the capacity to get there. And I was just thinking, like, were your numbers better when you made your red point attempt? I'm curious, like, or was it just finding different movement, finding different beta that unlocked the red point rather than getting your hangboard numbers up?
Yeah, well, definitely my hangboard numbers weren't up. I think what was up was my power endurance, and doing a kind of a focus block right before that of some like Eric Hurst 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, like kind of all out sprints for 6 reps, and then a couple sets of those. I talked with him about that, like on one of the Road to 13A episodes. And I felt better going in. And then similarly to what you did is I replicated kind of the load that it would have on my body as best as I could at the local gym here. There's a tread wall and a moonboard in close proximity. And so I did not many sessions because I didn't want to get like injured or whatever, but I did a handful of sessions where I would climb at a similar kind of angle and difficulty on the tread wall, and then when the Crux kind of came, run over and do that on like the moonboard, or there's a little spray wall that I actually set a replica at for a period of time. And so I got to like almost replicate as much as I could, or simulate as much as I could kind of the what the feeling would be on my body. And I do think that really helped quite a bit. But it's hard to pinpoint for me because the project was so long that it's cumulative. I think it was a lot of things. But I guess to your original question, I don't think it had anything to do with finger strength. Something that we all like to obsess over quite a bit. It sounds like for you, that was also the case. And how long was this project? Do you know how many approximate days you put on it?
I don't know. Embarrassingly, maybe like 10. But like,
why embarrassingly? I think I put like
no.
50.
Was that a lot, or is that? Yeah. Well, I mean, like, what I mean is like, I think, yeah, I hadn't really ever project around it before, so I think I feel like, yeah, like I should have put in more work first.
No, I mean, it's a great indication. This means that you can go out and that it means that 13A likely isn't your hardest.
No, man. I mean,
try to do.
It's funny. Like I got back and I was like, I got it. I got the 13A when my friends like just got back from Spain was like, I mean, the Euros, they care about 8A. So you're still in the sevens, man.
That's next route.
Not there yet. And I was like, oh shoot. All right. Just never ends, does it?
7C plus 13. I mean, it does. Yeah, exactly. Like what does any of it mean actually, Doug? But for you, it seems like you just learned a lot about yourself and what works for you in terms of your training that you can then apply to the next thing, whether it's an 8A or a 12D or whatever kind of project you get psyched on next. It sounds like you've learned quite a bit about understanding how to identify when you hit a plateau and move on to the next thing and what interventions work for you, which I think is like super valuable. More valuable than sending a thing is figuring out the components that help you to send the thing. And were there any other realizations in that process that you can share? And if not, I want to shift pretty soon here and talk a little bit more about trad climbing.
I mean, the only other thing was, I think for most of my climbing life, I've just been overtraining and doing, in the power phase, really bringing down the volume and realizing like I needed 2 full rest days before doing a hard power day was really key. Where before, if I took 2 rest days, I would feel like internally guilty about like not doing enough. And especially in the power endurance phase, I was climbing maybe 3 days a week. I would do a power endurance day, rest 2 days, a power day, rest 2 days, and then a power endurance day. And I think the other thing that I kind of realized is like 7 day a week helps because the rest of our lives are based on 7 days, but there's nothing special about the number 7.
Right.
And I said this before that like the most dangerous training tool for a climber is a calendar. Because there are days where you're like, I said Monday is my power day. And you show up Monday and you're like, man, I'm just not feeling good. And it's like, you know what? It's not the right. Like there's nothing special about Monday. Just take an extra rest day and do it on Tuesday. But like for us, we think like, no, Monday's my power day. So I have to do it ready or not. And I think what I realized was if it's ready or not, I'm just going to dig myself a deeper hole. So like giving myself the permission for extra rest, especially as I got closer to sort of like my peak phase, was like really important. Back to the concept of rest.
Love that, Doug. All right, y'all, just want to take a quick second here to tell you how I'm staying healthy and taking care of myself as I'm now pushing my body to the hardest limits I've ever pushed it as a rock climber. And the way that I'm fueling these gains that I'm working so hard to get is with Fizzy Vantage Nutrition. Y'all know Fizzy Vantage. They've been a sponsor of the show since the very first episode, and I've been a paying customer of Fizzy Vantage since long before there was ever a podcast. And why is that, Ryan? Why am I buying Fizzy Vantage products? Well, it's because they work. They're designed by climbers for climbers to help us climb our best. Every single day, I'm taking their supercharged collagen before I do like a little light fingerboard workout, like the Abra hangs that I've talked about here on this show, or before I go climbing or go to the gym. And I'm also fueling up either before or after a workout with one of their protein powders. It's like my sweet treat that I have. And the most important thing, as I mentioned, is that it works. Most coaches and doctors and dietitians are going to tell you that you should probably take in about a gram of protein per body weight every single day if you're an athlete and you're trying to fuel your gains. So for me, 155 grams of protein is a lot of protein in a day. And I love a whole foods diet, but I have to supplement in order to hit that goal. And I do it by using Fizzy Vantage. Hit that link right there in your show notes and you'll get 15% off pretty much everything over at the Fizzy Vantage store, or use code STRUGGLE15 at checkout to get that discount, and let's get after it. Let's talk about trad climbing for a little bit here, because that's an area that you're also psyched on and focused on. And geographically, you're in like one of the coolest places in the world to be a traditional climber. And it's an area that, for me, I'm in a sport climbing, like a hard charging sport climbing phase, but I can already see on my like long lens of planning that not likely next year, but the year after is I'm kind of softly penciling in a trad year, and maybe many trad years beyond that, because I really like the experience of placing gear, of being on the wall for a day with a friend, and ultimately maybe topping something out. So anyway, the psych is there for me. It's brewing, but I'm pretty much a noob. I've done a bit of it, but fairly noob still in that world. And I'm curious what you might be able to share with me and others listening who might be psyched on trad, or maybe want to be psyched on trad but don't know where to get into it. What can you share?
So I was trying to organize my thoughts, so we're not just rambling incoherently, but also not just giving you a like instruction, step-by-step guide.
Sure.
And so the way I was sort of thinking about it is you have these like 4 realms of trad climbing. You have the technique of how do you actually get up the crack.
Right.
You have the realm of protection. How do you actually protect yourself while you're getting up the crack? And then the third realm is, what do you do when you get to the top? And I think that is its own category, because it becomes very important if you're doing more than one pitch stacked on top of each other. And then the other thing is just general fitness. We're talking about training. There's training for cracks.
Right.
And so I kind of have a couple of my learnings in each of those realms, if you want to go through those.
Yeah, I would love to. All of those buckets sound great, and thank you for coming prepared.
Yeah. So the first thing is, I'm not a great crack climber. I think I'm pretty well versed in 5'10" Yosemite. The nice thing about 5'10" Yosemite is then you realize you're kind of like 5'11" anywhere else.
I was going to say, that's like 5'10" Yosemite is really hard. I mean, I like struggled my way up the Nutcracker the last time I was there. So, take great Yosemite grades with a grain of salt to the listener who maybe hasn't been out to the valley.
Totally. And I think John Long had said it when he said there are very few actual 5'10" Yosemite or 5'10" climbers. And I'll admit, like there are I have not done Twilight Zone yet, and Ahab is another just notoriously hard 10B off with. I've not successfully done that yet. So I'm not fully there on 5'10", but I'm on my road to 5'10".
Love it.
But anyway, so crack climbing just did not come natural to me. So I had to really make these more concrete rules of thumb to kind of help me figure out what to do with my hands and my feet in the crack. And so I made over the years these 4 rules for myself that I've given other people that are getting into crack climbing. And I like them because it kind of messes with your mind. Each rule breaks the preceding rule.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's great. You got to learn the rules before you can break the rules.
Exactly. So rule number 1, this is, for this technique style part, the realm. Rule number 1 is you always jam thumbs up. And the reason is that if your thumbs up, you can reach like 4 feet above your head, or above your last jam, and you get so much more distance. But if you do thumbs down, a thumbs down jam above your head, it pins your body underneath the hand. So you can't really get but more, maybe like one foot of reach above that jam. So you get so much more distance with a thumbs up jam than a thumbs down jam. So always go for a thumbs up. And it's especially important because a lot of these cracks that aren't totally uniform, they'll have like a wide, awkward pod, and the pod might be too wide for fists. And so that could be the difference of doing a thumbs up hand jam and just bypassing this awkward section right to another thumbs up hand jam and keeping the whole thing nice, relaxed, like 5/8 hands, versus having to do an intermediate awkward off with move to get through this like wide pod.
Yeah. Yeah. So thumbs up, and that makes sense. So thumbs up is going to allow you to do less moves to cover more distance, which is of course very efficient climbing. And then why would you break the rule then? Why would you go thumbs down?
Unless it's a bad jam. Then thumbs down works a lot better if you have like a thin jam, especially thin jam or a little bit flared. And it's because you sort of get like the thenar part, the hypothenar, like the thumb meat is in. And so I should say, just, it's a podcast. So when I'm saying thumbs up, it's like picture you're giving someone a thumbs up or thumbs down, and then you're reaching above your head. So now it's, instead of saying thumbs up, thumbs down, it's essentially like thumb in deeper to the crack or a thumb pointing out of the crack facing you. So thumbs up is thumb facing you, gives you longer reach. But if the thumb is in the crack, thumbs down, then you get more of that sort of expandable meat in the sort of narrow constriction that helps you get into what would otherwise be a pretty insecure jam.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my experience, and again, it's quite limited experience, although I was out in Moab not too long ago doing some crack climbing with one of the true goats, Mr. Tom Randall.
Oh, right.
I guess probably for the reasons you just stated. A thumbs down jam just feels more secure to me. But to your point, it requires a lot more moves, in order to kind of climb that way. So break the rule, to your point, break the rule if the thumbs up jam is bad, and then flip your hand over, do a thumbs down jam. It's going to be more secure, but you're not going to be able to take benefit of the first rule, which is you get to do less moves to cover more distance. Okay, that's good. What about rule number 3?
Yeah. So I said, do a thumbs down if you have a bad jam. Rule 3 is don't accept a bad jam.
That's great. And to rule number 1.
Yeah. So and what I mean by that is a lot of times, especially like in Yosemite and like where you're not just, and actually in Indian Creek too, and some of these like thin finger ring, even if it's a splitter, there's nuances in it. So what I'll see people do is they're like, I see a section and I'm putting my hand or my fingers in this section. And it's not very good. But if they had just gone like a few inches above, a few inches down, if they had gone, thumbs up or thumbs down for fingers, or had just swapped it and gone with their left hand instead of their right hand, they could have actually found like a really good locker jam. And sometimes that's like when things become flared or they're thin or the crack's a little offset. If it's offset, like one hand will feel so solid. Like you could get a ring in there and the whole side of your hand is against this sort of offset side of the crack sticking out. But if you try with the other one, it's going to feel really insecure. So a lot of times I feel like I'll remind myself where I go up to a section and I'm like, ooh, I don't like this. Like this is just, I just can't find a thing that feels secure. And I'm like, you know what? Don't accept it. Just keep looking. And I spend like literally 4 or 5 seconds, just look, just an extra couple seconds looking. And then I find something that's really good and I can just move past. So just, if you're like, oh, that jam's really bad, before you just like commit to it, just think there might be a better jam a few inches away.
Yes. All right. So the rule number 3 is don't accept a bad jam, which was rule number 2. Well, then how do we, now what's 4? How do we undo rule number 3?
So if you have to accept a bad jam,
right,
there's no way around it, then make small moves. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a marginal jam, like a ring lock or a fingers or something, and it's a little flared and it's not great. The best way to hang on to that is when you are straight down, the forces are going straight down and you're underneath it. So what I see is occasionally, and I've done this myself, where you get a bad jam and you're like, oh, it's not very good. But 3 feet away, there's a really good pod. So I just need to like pull through this as hard as I can, make one insecure move, and I'm just going to lurch for that jug or that, that perfect, textbook hand jam, and I'll be golden.
Right.
What happens is you take this not secure flared jam, and as you do a big move, you change the forces from down, which are making it work, to now as you pull on that and you move above it, the forces change from down to out. And now that downward force is no longer there holding you in, and you fall like inches away from the jug. Yeah. So you get this sort of like, anchor fever, jug fever, where you're just like, I just got to make one move till I can get there. And just, so I have to tell myself like aloud, don't rush it. Don't get anchor fever. Just like, it's a small, not good jam. So then I'm going to stay underneath it. My elbow is going to stay really close to the rock so the forces are going down and not out. And then maybe I'm going to find another jam that's like 1 foot, 6 inches higher and just make these really small, delicate moves. And then I'll get to the jug. Yeah. But if I try to rush it and just say, you know what, it's a bad jam, but there's a jug 3 feet away, I'm just going to go for it, you're going to fall.
This is great. This is like a little mini masterclass in crack climbing here. This is exactly what I needed, Doug. So yeah, all right. Love the hierarchy there. And it also gives me something like a fun mental checklist to do. As you said, you just sometimes have to remind yourself of it as you're going through. There's something to be said for making bad holds or bad jams in this case work, because then you're like, oh, okay, I could make that work. It's just like a mental discomfort that one has to deal with. And I'm curious on the mental side, because traditional climbing can be a little bit more heady, or can be a lot more heady than climbing on bolts. Is there anything in that, on the mindset side, that you've discovered about yourself that you feel is worth sharing with regard to, leaving the comfort of the bolts behind and climbing above gear that you've placed?
God, I wish I had like sage advice, but like, no, I'm still scared.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just like a very slow progression in working your way up. And you may find that like at the beginning, like just take, you're not sure about this and you're not sure, like just take. It builds trust in the piece. Just take. And then
like hang on the piece, like you place a piece, take, and now you're like, oh, okay, that piece is solid.
It's solid. Look around. And then just exposure. Like it's weird. Like, so I got into Yosemite, everything was scary, and it still is. But then I was like, I've never climbed 513. I'm going to try the sport climb. And then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, these bolts are like kind of far apart. It's like,
right.
Like if I was trad climbing right now, I definitely would put in a piece, but you don't have a choice in a sport climb. You don't have any gear. It's like, God, I really wish there was an extra bolt here. And I'm thinking, oh God, sport climbing's scarier than trad climbing.
It's all relative.
So I think it's just like go slow, and just like you're going to build confidence with familiarity. And, I still have, like, I'll tell you, I have a fear of liebacks, and it's because I like sort of like knock on wood. The one time I got kind of banged myself up was on a lieback, and I was on a lieback, my foot slipped. And the scary thing with liebacks are, one, you're lying back, so you usually can't see what kind of gear you're placing in the crack. You're kind of guesstimating it. And then number two, if your foot slips, you fall into the rock, not away from the rock. Right. And what I did is I fell into the rock, slid right down the rock, and hit a ledge. And I'll tell you, I banged up my left ankle, and that was probably 8 years ago, and my ankle has just never been the same. And so I still, like, I get kind of spooked on liebacks. And I actually built a lieback machine in my garage because I was like, I have got, it's just like I said, like familiarity builds confidence. And I'm like, I have just got to practice lieback moves so I can become more, more confident on liebacks. And also it's, the mental aspect. You feel less worried when you have a plan. And so I feel, and this kind of goes into mental aspect, also speed. And I'll say being fast or faster. If you look at really fast climbers, they don't climb fast. They climb decisively. And a lot of crack climbing is you climb stance to stance. And when you're on a stance, a lot of times people are thinking, oh God, that was scary. And you're thinking about the past.
Right.
Instead, you're just, I've got a stance, I'm going to chalk up and I'm going to look ahead. And where I'm looking for is, where is my next stance? And many times, if you're looking for the stance, what I mean is, where are your feet going to sit? And a lot of times it's like 2 or 3 feet above your hands. And I'll just look and I'm like, oh, that's a good foothold. That's a good pod that I'm going to stick my foot in the crack. And I'm going to look for like where I can place my next piece of protection. And many times, and hopefully as much times as possible, the stance correlates with the next place to place protection.
Right.
And then I look down and I look for any hazards, like any, I hit a ledge. So I am now looking around for ledges. And the ledge I hit, by the way, was the width of a laptop. It's not big. It's just I fell into the rock and you're falling on a vertical piece of rock into the rock. So then if I see that ledge below me, I'm like, I'm not going to climb to the next stance because it's going to be 12 feet up or 10 feet up. I'm going to place a piece of pro, so it's going to keep me safe from the ledge below, and then I'm going to get to that stance, and then I'll reassess. And that whole decision process is probably like, it's like 10 seconds. But doing that and then having a plan, keeps you moving quicker rather than if you don't have like and maybe it's just my brain, if I don't have a checklist of things to go through, you just sort of spiral. And then like, wait, 5 minutes went through and like, what am I thinking about again? Like I'm right back to where I was, which is, that's hard, I'm scared, and what do I do next? And, like now, I took my daughter on Nutcracker and I had a GoPro on and I was like, I led each pitch in like 5 to 8 minutes. And, if I had not had that sort of mental checklist, it probably would have been 25 minutes, and that's the difference Nutcracker doesn't matter, but like if you're going to climb like, a 1,500 foot climb, that's the difference of coming down in the daylight and eating pizza at the pizza deck or getting benighted.
Totally. Yeah, man, I really like how thoughtful all of that is and the distinction you made between, climbing fast versus climbing decisive and having a plan. And the decisiveness really can contribute. To your point, it's compounded. If there's 15 pitches, that efficiency and that decisiveness really matters. But I guess what matters the most, though, is did you do the Royal Robbins direct to Nutcracker or did you do the original Nutcracker? Because I did the direct to Nutcracker, and that first pitch was nails, Doug.
It's scary. I did it once.
It's scary. It's like flaring shitty little fingers up. I'm like, what is this?
So, yeah, you first have like 15 feet of no pro.
Totally.
And then you get to a ledge, and then you have these like flaring pods, but it doesn't matter because if you blow that move, you're hitting the ledge. No. This is the 5.9 direct, is it?
Yeah, the 5.9 direct on it. Yeah. Yeah. The scariest 5.9 I've ever been on. It was terrifying.
It's scary. But it's not you, it's the route.
The last pitch of that one's super fun too, because you kind of get that bulging like little mini roof move there, which I bet your daughter made very easy work of. But like it's exposed and it's fun, and yeah, what a cool route.
Yeah, and then Super Topo, that's the other thing is like I read about all these climbs, but reading can also be terrible for you because I think Super Topo is like, and then you have to do a mantle. Don't mess this one up because you'll break your ankles.
Right.
You're like, oh, thanks, I guess.
Yeah, but it's totally fine because you can place like 2 pieces right before you pull the move and all that. I think it's safe. Yeah. Oh man, I could geek out over this stuff. We'll have to do another call when I get my next Valley trip planned. But man, I'm really grateful. First of all, congratulations. I mean, you and I are in similar boats here with like a couple of kids, similar age, very busy, and you're pushing yourself to new levels, both as a sport climber, both with your metrics on your hangs and other things that you're doing, and also really getting it after it in a technical way with these climbs, man. It's really exciting. I guess to wrap things up, can you share a little bit about, what your goals might be for the fall or the winter or beyond? What are you psyched on?
Yeah, see, that if I don't say anything, then I don't have to commit to anything.
You're talking to a guy who does nothing but like air out his goals like on this show all the time. So maybe don't take my advice. If you want to keep them to yourself, Doug, you keep them to yourself.
Well, this is 2 final things I'll leave you with. One was Yeah, so I have this like pipe dream of maybe at some point doing Midnight Lightning.
Ooh,
Have
yeah.
you seen
And
that
for
climb?
for those who are listening, this is another mega sandbag, the Yosemite climb. It's a iconic boulder, which I think, what does it get, like V7 or V8? But like it's harder than that.
It's V8, and
Yeah.
I think it's like right at 12 feet, 12 or 13, 14, like higher than you want to fall. You have to do a really insecure, slopey mantle.
Yeah.
And anyway, I've got a hack for it, which is a couple times, being a sort of quasi local, I can come out in the winter, and I've seen it a couple times when it dumps snow in Yosemite. There's like 3 or 4 like feet of snow on the ground, and suddenly that mantle, you can just reach up and grab it, and it doesn't feel like it's going to kill you. So I have this like
Love
thought
that.
of like maybe in January or February when it's like buried under snow, I'll dust the snow off the top of that thing and I'll try the mantle when it's not actually 12 feet off the ground.
So good. That's great.
And then the other thing I'll just say, like, I think this is, there's lots of stuff to talk about with cracks and stuff. And I think the main thing that I see in Yosemite, and, like I'm like an average climber, but, I've done 3 different routes on El Cap. I've done, the northwest face of Half Dome. I've done Leaning Tower. The one thing I really want to do is the Salathé. I think that's the thing on the El Cap that I've not done yet.
Heck yeah.
I'd want to. The other stuff, it's very entry level, the other climbs. And, after like, Lurking Fear, the Nose, Triple Direct, it starts becoming more serious. You got to be more of a real climber for those routes.
No, you are very much a real climber just based on the things that you've done there. But yeah, the Salathé looks amazing and obviously historic.
Yeah, for sure. And so what I see in Yosemite is this conflation with grades and technique. And I would say if you're coming to Yosemite, you have to decouple those two. And I'll leave you with the very first climb that I did in Yosemite was just totally inappropriately. I did the rostrum. And
wow.
I was like, I was like a 512 sport climber. This thing's 5'11". I don't really climb trad at all. But there was a guy who was like, I haven't been on the rostrum, but I want to climb it, and I'm pretty good at trad. So I was like, I'll do the 5'9", 5'10" sections. You could do the 5'11" sections. It'll be fine. And that thing tuned me up. And right down to the very first pitch, it's barely even mentioned on the topo. It's a 5'7" chimney. And I didn't know how to do a chimney. And I think I've done it, I've done the rostrum like, a half a dozen times since then, and
Amazing.
You can protect it. But in my mind, I had such tunnel vision. It was like, I couldn't protect it. I'm climbing a chimney. It's flared. It feels so insecure. And I'm just looking down at this ledge I'm going to hit if I blow it. And I get to the top and I'm like totally gripped. And this Valley local who climbed the rostrum 50 times came up and he's like, "What are you doing on this thing?" And I was like, I don't know. I'm like a 5'12" sport climber. It's 5'11" trad. I thought, and he's like, no. All the legends were super strong climbers. And they were like 5'7", I'm starting back at the basics. Chimneys, 5'7", off with 5'7", and then I go to off with 5'8", and then I go to off with 5'9", and then it's like, and they do the same thing for stemming. They do the same thing for slab. They do the, so they do the same thing for liebacks. So I realized Yosemite is so much more technique based than grade based, and I've seen people that get way in over their heads because they associate their ability with a grade, not with their familiarity of a technique. So that stuck with me so much. And I took the guide and I circled every off with. And I was like, I'm going to do all the 5'7" off widths. I'm going to do all the 5'8". And then I made like an off width circuit, and I was like, I dialed off widths. And also I'll tell you, off widths are the dirty little secret for Yosemite, where I had avoided it and I thought it was completely optional. And then all the climbs, these iconic climbs that I wanted to do, I realized they have a little bit of chimney in it. They have a little bit of off with it. Like the rostrum is uber classic. It has a pitch of 5'10", number 5 levitation style off with. And what I found was like trying to avoid it, I would often go on these bigger climbs and I get shut down by like 10 feet of rock. So I was like, I got to learn this technique. And what I would say is if you're going to go on a multi-pitch climb, there's a sense of like, you do belong there. You belong in Yosemite, but just, so I don't want this to feel like people don't belong in Yosemite. It doesn't belong to me. And most of these like no-name locals like climb circles around me. But I would say before getting on a route, just ask yourself, am I prepared to be on this route? And I've seen people going up where they're just really struggling. And then, people make snarky comments that's holding up all the other people that want to be on there. And what is they're just not ready to be on that climb. And all the other people there are ready. And so when you're coming into Yosemite for the first time, pick some like not uber classic multi-pitches, like pick some single pitch climbs and just try out what it off with feels like. Or let's say you want to do a 5'9" classic multi-pitch climb and just look at the topo, see what techniques are involved. And then just like, if you're going to be there for a week, your first day, just try out those techniques, see how they feel. And you can learn a lot from that. And then, sorry, one last thing. I just, I don't get paid to say this or anything, but like, hire a guide. Like I at some point realized all my friends that golf have a golf instructor. All my friends that play tennis, they have a tennis instructor. I'm like, I've never had an instructor climbing. And I hired a Yosemite mountain guide and we did the northeast buttress of Higher Cathedral, which I was very nervous about because it's essentially a giant off-width squeeze chimney. And I was nervous about it, and I heard it had bad route finding issues. And the guide showed me so many techniques and so many ways to get through it. And he also showed me where the route goes, where it goes left, where it goes right. And then I came back the next week with my friend, and I'm like, I'm going to lead every single pitch. And we did it, and I topped out, it's like a 1,200-foot climb. I topped out at noon. And I was just like, this was amazing. And it was worth every dollar to hire that Yosemite mountain guide. And these guys, that guide had like climbed the nose in 5 hours. He had rope soloed Half Dome. They're like genuine badasses. And there's such an amazing resource. And they love taking real climbers to do real climbs. They're not just doing like birthday parties on Swan Slab. So you're making their day. It's worth every dollar to hire a mountain guide. They will teach you so much. And then you can go out and climb that climb without them and have like the best day of your life. So anyway, it's such an underutilized resource.
All right, y'all, that wraps things up with our weekend warrior, Doug Hartman. Doug, thank you for taking the time. I learned so much from this conversation. I learned so much from all of these weekend warrior episodes. I'm just going to keep rocking them out. And if you are a weekend warrior, as you're listening to this right now, and I think you probably are, if you think you got a story to share, some beta, some insights, or just some stoke that you want to get out to the community, I'd love to hear from you. And maybe we can get you over here on the show. And you do that by filling out a Google form. It only takes probably 5 minutes or something like that. And the link to that is in Patreon. See, this is my tricky way of getting you to go over and join Patreon. You don't have to pay for it. You can pay for it. I would love for you to pay for it because that's how I keep this show going. But there is a free tier. So if you are a weekend warrior and just fully into that dirtbag style, or you just already have so many subscriptions you can't imagine taking on another one, I totally get it. I have like 1 million subscriptions myself, but I also support a lot of creators out there. I support like 10 different climbers and climbing podcasts, and then, things outside of climbing as well, people that I really appreciate the work that they're doing. So anyway, if you are in a position to be able to support me, I'd appreciate it. And even if you're not, you still support me by joining Patreon under the free tier. And in there is the link to the Weekend Warrior form that you could fill out. And I'd love to hear from you. Maybe we can have a conversation for the show. And another reason to pop over to Patreon is that I'm putting a video up here that Doug just shared with me. After we had this conversation, he sent me this video showing me his at-home crack training dojo that he created himself. And as he said, admittedly, he is not a very handy person, but you wouldn't know what to look at this because he built a finger crack trainer, a hand crack trainer, an off-width trainer, a lie-back trainer, and a crack or like a hand jam hangboard. He built all of these himself with readily available materials. Looks like mostly 2x4s, and it sounds like the construction was quite easy. And anyway, he shows us around that and goes into detail on the hand jam hangboard, if you will. So even if you don't have room in your place for like a full kind of crack climbing trainer, you could just use a few 4x4s and make them adjustable. And Doug walks us through how he did that. And it's a great way to build, as he explains, that very specific endurance that's needed for climbing cracks. It's very little on the forearm flexors that we so commonly train with things like a traditional hangboard or block lifts or just climbing on edges or jugs. When you're hand jamming, you're mostly using these muscles in your hand, the intrinsic muscles there, as he explains them, like the thumb muscle and all of that. And you're not going to get that by doing hangboards. So it doesn't matter what your hangboard numbers are. If you want to climb cracks, you could probably spend about $20 on wood and screws and put together one of these hand jam hangboards like Doug lays out, and you'll be setting yourself up for success. I wish I had done that about 2 months ago. It's probably a little bit too late for me now that my Squamish trip is coming up, but it might not be too late for you. So pop over to Patreon. You can sign up for the Weekend Warrior Forum, and you can also see that bonus video of Doug walking us through his basement dojo. Doug, thanks again for doing that. And thank you out there, wherever you're at, however you're training, whatever you're psyched on. You, my fellow weekend warrior, you're awesome. We're in this together. Let's keep cranking, and I will see you next week.